So, good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to NCOSI Talk Show here Wednesday, the 5th of April. We're sliding into April very quickly. And today we have Nick Wojtycka, Amanda Cottrell, and Grant Murrell, Murrell, with us. And these three speakers are going to be sharing tips and points and their thoughts about setting boundaries, creating healthy work-life balance. And the title, I know, of the talk show here today is 5 Tips for Setting Boundaries and Achieving a Healthy Work-Life Balance. So something that I like to hear about, and I'll be sitting in the background and listening. And Grant, I believe this was your topic, your idea. So perhaps you'd like to explain where it came from, and through the talk today, perhaps introduce yourselves, what you do at some point, and go on, just hear what this topic is about.
Thank you,
So I look
Caroline.
forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Grant Murrell. I'm an international speaker, coach, trainer, and international best-selling author. And over the past 20 years, myself and an international team have helped thousands of entrepreneurs, business owners, organizations across 15 plus countries. We've helped them to increase their profits up to 200%, often in just a few short months, just by working with their team, their systems, their mindset, and their strategy, so that they can live a life of passion, purpose, and freedom, and develop a business and a lifestyle that can become a legacy for generations to come. Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am a teacher and an author, and I love to help empower people connect with their creativity. Nick?
Hello, I am an entrepreneur. I have started a fashion apparel brand here in Canada, and that was after a 17-year career in law enforcement. So went from one side of the world to the other, basically, in my career. And I just have a real interest in writing and speaking and helping people, I guess, through my story.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, I mean, this week's subject is about setting boundaries and creating a healthy work-life balance. Because as we know, in this modern day, people are busier than they ever were. There's more demands placed upon them, more expectancy, more guilt if people don't do those things. So very easily, I'm sure all of us at one point or another have found it very difficult not to create that, or not to want to create that work-life balance. It's something that's often spoken about in the workplace, and it's bantered around, and people always say, oh yes, work-life balance, work-life balance. It's talked about, but do we really understand it? Do we really explore it? So that's what the subject is going to be about today. So who would like to jump in and just kickstart it and just give your thoughts around it? Nick, Amanda?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So yeah, just coming from through my career, so working for the government and having my days scheduled, and in that world, it was a lot easier, I think, to have that work-life balance in a sense, because there was a very defined shift, and you started at X time, ended at that time. And then being a government worker, there was no, depending on your unit, of course, but there was not as much expectation to do work outside of those hours. And then to transition into being an entrepreneur and a solopreneur, those demands have really changed, and there is a lot of those tasks come in at all sorts of hours and on different days of the week. And so I'm really kind of in the middle of figuring that balance out. Absolutely. And it's been an interesting journey for sure, and it's definitely an ongoing one for me. But this topic is super important because, like Grant said, there's so many people now, working from home, and also just with technologies advancing, there is so many more demands outside of those regular business hours. And so finding that that healthy balance and what works for you is just becoming more and more important. So I'm excited to hear your guys' information and tips on it, and see if I can learn something today as well.
Thanks. I was just thinking, before we go into the tips themselves, would it be an idea to share some personal experience of what we've had with work-life balance, and also recognizing those signs of when it becomes just a little bit too much and you think, something needs to be addressed here, something needs to work. I'm sure, Amanda, in the workplace, school teachers, a lot must be placed upon you with that. Have you had any tips?
Especially like beginning teachers. Like when I think back to being a beginning teacher, like I worked like 14, 15-hour days just to be able to like be prepared enough to come into the classroom the next day. And I think back and I'm like, I don't know how I did it. But at the same time, I feel like whenever you start something new, it's like 100 times harder than once you already know how to do it. And so, but I also find too that we're kind of the opposite of the police area, where we are expected to work outside of our regular hours all the time. And we're expected to do extracurricular or to respond to emails, and that work-life balance, it quickly disappears. And so for me, now that I've taught for a long time, I have like tips and tools and different things that I can pull at any point in time. And I feel like even if I wasn't planned, I could walk into a classroom for a day and teach whatever now. But originally I would plan for hours and hours and hours. And so finding tools to make that flow easier is something that takes a long time to develop. And I know as beginning teachers, they're completely overwhelmed. And that's why I think it's over 50% stop teaching after the first 5 years, because it's just such a demanding job. And so I think too, you really need to sometimes be like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes it just has to be like, this is what we're doing, because you have to take care of yourself first, because you can't take care of anybody else unless you're also taken care of. And I think that's something that especially teachers, because most of them are like very empathic people, they forget about taking care of themselves. And that's something that we really truly need first before we can take care of others. What do you think, Grant?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, absolutely. What you said there, Amanda, is true. You've got to take care of yourself first before it comes to anybody else, because, it always comes to that point, doesn't it? Whereby, we've all heard the analogy, we've used it on the show before, is that you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You go on the airliner, it says if you're carrying a baby and there's lack of oxygen, the instinct is to go and help the others. No, you've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you're not in a strong position, you can't help others. So you've got to look after yourself for the sake of others. And I think that's so important that we take that. But this is where mindset comes in, isn't it? Because that's where the guilt factor comes in. Oh, I've got to do it. I've got to do it. The guilt is a big thing in today's society. We feel guilty. I know a lot of parents feel guilty for not doing X, not doing Y, not doing Z. If somebody... One of the recognized symptoms of grief, of bereavement, is guilt. You feel guilt. If only I'd have done X, if only I'd have done Y. This is how it plays tricks in your mind. But in reality, you've probably done more than enough anyway. But of course, it's a psychological trick. So guilt plays a big part in modern life. And you have to be very careful of that. You have to ask yourself, is this real or is it fiction on our mind? Is it playing a trick? In the same way that a friend, and she had a story last night that she was walking along. Now, 10 years ago, I was with the same friend. And this friend of mine is terrified of mice. Her friend was terrified of frogs. 10 years ago, they walked along the street and both jumped, because the one who was terrified of frogs saw a frog on the ground. The one who was terrified of mice saw a mouse on the ground. It was a leaf. The other day, they saw the same friend and they both jumped because, yeah, you guessed it. The one who hates frogs saw a frog on the ground, and the one who saw a mouse on the ground. Someone had dropped a glove. That's what it was. So, yeah, we were laughing about this 10 years later. They're still the same. But of course, there's the thing. We guilt, we worry about things. And is it perception or is it reality, is my point. So I think we need to ask ourselves that question. If we're feeling guilt, is it perception or is it reality? Are you already doing enough or because other people are under pressure? Are they putting too much pressure on you? And I've certainly experienced this in my life, where people put too much pressure on me, and it's not because they necessarily want to, it's because someone putting pressure on them too. And they're just passing it along. There's no excuse for it, but there's a mitigating circumstance. I knew what was going on with the person. And you have to ask yourself this, I think. So, are you not efficient enough? Let's be honest. Let's look at it. Are we not efficient enough? Do we need to be, more efficient, more organized in what we do so that we can, do the right amount? And I emphasize the word right amount, because it comes back to this thing. When is enough is enough? When do you set those boundaries? And then what do you do about it? It's really important, I think, that you look at it this way. So always don't just naturally say, this is too much. Ask yourself the question, is there something I could do to organize myself better? Is it me? Is it me, first of all? Ask yourself that question. And if there's an opportunity to learn, then it's great. You become a more efficient human being. There's a great opportunity to learn. Every time we grow, there's a challenge. In any business, in any organization, it's normal. You do something new, and there's a bit of chaos, there's a little bit of tension, a little bit of friction, because there's something new going on. It takes a while to settle down, and then that becomes normal. So firstly, is it us? Let's be honest, don't always blame other people. Is it us? Is there something we need to do better? If so, yes. Okay. Opportunity to become even better than we already are. Great. If not, then perhaps we need to look at it. Is there something that needs to change? What needs to be changed? And Nick, what is your experience of this?
Yeah, I was just thinking, as you guys have both been talking, and Amanda, you mentioned how different it is in teaching compared to the policing world. And then as soon as you said that, I thought, well, that's just different than the Calgary police. But when I go back to my RCMP days, there was 100% an expectation to do all those things outside of business hours. And I remember at the beginning of my policing career, it was, I was putting in just crazy amounts of hours, and they call it VOT, so voluntary overtime. And it was an expectation. Like, if you weren't doing that, you were not getting through your recruit field training and all of that. And then to fast forward to the municipal police force that I ended up with about 6 years later, and that, because of union and all that sort of thing, there's no way that they could ask you to do that. And so just a very different mindset, I guess, in that organization. And so just for anyone listening to think about, what are those external pressures, right? Like Grant, you mentioned those pressures getting put on you from the outside, and to realize, I guess, where those are coming from. And that might be really helpful in those moments where people are really putting that pressure on you and you're under the gun, is to kind of take a step back and I guess see the bigger picture and realize that it's not you specifically, it's coming from a lot higher levels than just that person who's all up in your business in that moment, basically telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And then I was also thinking too, is how, and Grant, you were mentioning it, is how we learn new things, and how when we're going through it for the first time, it is very chaotic and it's stressful and there's resistance and all the things. And then as you work your way through it, and then it comes up again, it just becomes easier and easier. And that was definitely my experience in my policing career, for sure, is once you kind of have that foundation, and Amanda, you mentioned it, is after those first few years, you kind of figure some things out, and you can be a little bit more, thinking on your feet and not having to plan everything out and whatnot. So that has definitely been my experience. And then for me now, just using those, I guess, experiences and tools I've gained over my law enforcement career now into my entrepreneurship journey. And I keep coming back to that. I basically made a career out of doing hard things, out of doing things that no one wants to do, right? Like, I mean, just the call will come in and it's like, okay, you have to go tell this parent that their child just died in a car crash. It's like, that's not a good job to have to do, but someone has to do it, and you're the one that's been delegated that task basically, and so you have to go out and do it. And so I've spent my life doing incredibly hard things that I definitely didn't want to do. And in the moment, it doesn't feel good at all. But now to have that experience in my back pocket, now, doing my business taxes for the first time, it's like, okay, this sucks, but it could be a lot worse, right? And I go back to kind of my mindset back in my policing days, and it was, well, of course, I gave the example where someone actually did die, but most days it's like bad things happen. It's like, well, but nobody died, so that's good, right? So I guess it's a perspective thing, and yeah, it's just an experience thing, and you kind of just have to figure out what works for you. And it's definitely an ongoing process, and it's not ever going to be perfect, right? And that expectation of perfection is, you're just setting yourself up for failure, because there's always going to be bumps in the roads and hiccups along the way. And at the end of it, you just have to figure out what works for you and what works for your family and your priorities, and make that work. And I was reading a quote here just before we came on, and they were talking about setting priorities. And this quote says, "The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities." It was by a gentleman named Stephen Covey. And that I think is really, really a good way to boil down a lot of these things that we're talking about into a really concise one quote, basically. And it's to, make sure that you're putting things into your schedule that are the priorities, right? And not just, kind of that triage sort of mindset. This goes beyond that, and to make sure that you're putting in your priorities, and that is your own physical health, your own mental health, that family time, to take vacations, to take time off, to unplug from the world. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, and I've definitely found that myself in this entrepreneurship journey, is to I went on a business mastermind trip back in just before Christmas, and it counterintuitive, because it's like, oh my God, I have so much to do, and like I have no business taking a vacation at this point, like what am I doing? But those connections and just that mindset shift and all of the amazing, valuable things that I got out of that trip was, you can't even put a value on that. And so to take that time and completely unplug from whatever your situation is, and not going to Mexico to drink my weight in tequila, right? That's maybe not so healthy, but for me to go on that business mastermind and to be with like-minded entrepreneurs, that had huge value for sure.
I love that. And the power of actually sharing ideas with other people is fantastic. The get together thing is wonderful. And I think it is to talk and discuss those things is really good. Did a thing with our local community last night. I did a thing to bring in together the sort of local leaders, but just to talk about stuff, best practice, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what can we do better, how can we help you more. It just, a handful of people got together and they just liked it, and it was great. I said, if we did another one, what would you like? Yeah, what would you like it to be about? Yeah, and that was it. It was just, there was no real fixed agenda apart from how can we help, how can we make it even better, and that was great. Amanda, before we get stuck into the tips, we're going to give everyone 5 tips for anybody listening out there in the world of social media. If you're listening, we're going to give you 5 tips today, 5 tips on how to create boundaries and create a healthy work-life balance. But before we get stuck into those, Amanda, have you got anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I do. As Nick was talking, he was saying, well, he shifted the perspective on like, well, nobody died today, so it was a good day, right? And sometimes when I have a rough day at work, or I'm struggling, or somebody else had a rough day, I think back to one of my biggest struggle days at school. And essentially it was a kid who had like some severe things going on with them. And it was like I was teaching a younger grade, and the child essentially stripped and ran around the classroom naked, threatening to pee in the classroom. And luckily, I recognized that they were escalating early enough, and I had a student teacher at the time, and I sent the class out to the library with the student teacher, and I just stood at the doorway watching and was like, what do I do? Like, what do you do except just laugh? I was like, just like holding the door, like, so I could just peek in and be like, I don't know what to do. He's trying to like run down the hallway naked.
I think, I mean, that's brilliant, Amanda, because, you know, these things happen. What would you do in a situation? And what did you do? You just, apart from laugh, what did you do?
Well, they kept trying to be like, I have to pee. I'm like, you are not going to pee in this classroom, and you are not going to run down this hallway naked. So put your clothes back on. And eventually he de-escalated and he put his clothes back on and he went to the bathroom. But I do have stories from other teachers of children actually peeing in the classroom, or actually peeing in the office, or pooping in the office, or whatever. My cousin was a principal and superintendent, and she actually has stories like that where children had pooped in their office. So our joke is always, if nobody peed or pooped in your office today, you're good.
So that's it. So Nick's got nobody died, so which is good.
Yeah.
Amanda's got no one peed or pooped in the office, which is good. I love aviation and I love flying, and we talk about, you know, sort of landing and false landings. Of course, you practice a false landing, which is a controlled crash, right? So when things haven't gone right and there's a malfunction, and we say this is not going to be a smooth landing, it's going to be a bumpy one, but you know what, we're going to make it a controlled crash, right? But when they do it, the unofficial term is any crash you walk away from is a good one. You know, you could sort out the insurance later. You walked away, you couple of bumps and bruises, that's a good one. Not that I've ever had one, not that I ever want to have one, but you know, we rationalize. And I was talking to someone several months ago in a situation, and they was creating a problem from something. You know, they was turning it into a problem. This had happened, and it was a kind of storm over nothing. Yeah, storm in a teacup, as we say. It was nothing, and I just. And you see, he was getting something out of turning it into an issue. And I hate drama. I can't be dealing with drama. Deal with the facts. Don't do drama. And as the guy was saying, I just said to him, and he was getting all puffed up about this problem that wasn't a problem with me. It was a problem that had been created by some small thing. And he was, you know, he was putting a lot of steam and air into it. He was building it up. And I said, hey, yeah, you're right. Now, I guess it could have gone better, but you know, it's a learning experience. Besides, worse things happen at sea, right? And he went, yeah. Because he realized he was just making a big fuss over another. Yeah, that thing didn't go according to plan. No, he said, no one died, no one peed or pooped in the office. Worse things happen at sea. We all go home and have a dinner with our loved ones. So, you know, it wasn't that bad, was it? Let's put it in proportion. And it comes back to my very, very, very first personal development seminar ever. And if ever I do something, it's always a baptism of fire. It wasn't a gentle one. It was Anthony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within, was the very first one I ever went to. And there were many, many great, great parts in it. But one which I took away, which probably was relevant to me at that time, and you always take away the parts that are relevant to you, was that when people say, it's our language you use. If something's a big problem, oh, it's a big problem. Yeah. Is it really a big problem? Really? I mean, let's just look at it. Yeah. And he come up with this wonderful expression, which I throw at myself sometimes. Is this thing that's bothering you now, is it going to be a problem in 5 years' time? And I would say for 99% of things, the answer is no. So in which case, it's not really a problem, is it? It's a minor inconvenience. So let's just put it in its right proportion and just shrink it down to where it should be. And, you know, I think this is one of the greatest things you can always say. And he said at the time that a person he knows who deals with huge businesses, who has big, big cataclysmic changes and decisions have to make. Something really big went wrong in his business. And he said to his board, I'm a little peeved. What happened? Isn't that a nicer use of language? He's a little peeved. But other people would have been screaming and bouncing off the walls. He said, I'm a little peeved about this, and I think we just need to rectify a couple of things. And took all the emotion away and just dealt with the fact, and it got resolved like that. And I think that's a really, really great letter, and that always stuck in my mind. And I thought that was a great takeaway from it. Wow, what a great way to address things. And if we embrace that ourselves, we can help to put things down. And of course, that can help if we got this work-life balance problem and it's, oh, I haven't got time. And you know what it's like when you get into things, you try to find a solution. But when you're so busy, what do you say? I haven't got time to fix it. Well, that's when you really do need to find the time to fix it, even if it means something else gets put to the wayside, which is already waiting, because unless you fix this now, it's never going to get better. So it is time. If you haven't got time to fix the work-life balance, trust me, you really need to be listening now, and you really need to fix it for your sake and for those around you. So tip number one we want to talk about is, and if you're at home, you may want to get your pens, papers, your tablets, whatever, or your recorders ready. Tip number one is recognize. Yes, recognize it. How do you know? How do you recognize when there is a misbalance with work-life balance? How do you know? Is it a gut feeling? You just feel a bit uneasy? Is it you feel stressed? Is it you haven't got time to eat? You get back in the evening and you see your breakfast is half eaten? What's going on? What is it? So what about, Nick and Amanda, how do you think there's ways you could recognize that you need to address the work-life balance?
For me, I'm lucky I have a spouse who would definitely point it out to me, first of all. So I might not even see it coming, because it's one of those things, right, that kind of is a slow build. And so yeah, I would say that would definitely be one way, is to listen to the people around you, whether that's your wife or kids or husband or anyone that's close to you, when they start asking you to do things or to, play with them if it's a kid, and you're kind of in that, oh, it's always no, it's always like, oh, no, I'm too busy, I can't do that. And I think that would be one good way to recognize that's happening. Amanda?
For me, it's definitely, I start to feel it in my body. So my neck will start to get really stiff. I'll start to get a little bit sick. I'm a little bit sick right now. But yeah, I definitely start to feel like the tension in my neck and my body, and just start to feel really run down when things start to get overwhelming. Okay.
Thank you. For me, it is a feeling of anxiety, I think, sort of somewhere in the stomach. So for us, it's for Nick, it's audible because his wife will tell him, right? But it's kinesthetic. It's a feeling you get. A feeling that something's just a bit off. You just feel a bit like, I'm not enjoying this. This is getting tough. This is becoming a chore now. This is, it's getting a bit too much. There isn't enough time. I like time to breathe and think in my life. I like to have, you would call it nothing time, but it's not. I mean, women would always say, men, go to that man cave space and just like go quiet and think. And I do. Most of my business now is, people think it's running around. No, it's thinking time. It's thinking, is this the best thing to do now? What's the best step in the next, for my business in connection to that? If I do that, will it affect that? Is that brand going to affect the alteration? With this, it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's moving parts, which requires time to think. If I don't get time to think, I start to feel a bit stressed, and I start to feel, hang on, there's a lack of work-life balance here. I'm rushing from meeting to meeting. There's none of this kind of reflection time, and that's what you need, because that's where the real change takes place, and that's where I can make the best moves going forward. That's how it works in my life. I mean, everybody's got a different way of operating in life. I'm not saying follow mine. It's just the way it works for me, and I need to have that. And if that gets encroached upon, if people keep changing plans last minute, I don't do that. I can't be doing that. I'm not a control freak with detail, but I can't have big changes, such as when I go on stage. Sometimes I've worked with certain people and it's all worked out, months before, or it should be. It's left to the last minute, and you're literally going on stage, you're mic'd up, you're wired up, and say, oh, instead of doing that, just do this and do this. And I'm like, Are you kidding? And that's happened on more than one occasion, I can promise. Yes, logistical things will change and you need to address that. I understand. But some things are just that people just didn't prepare it properly. And they're just like, you just want me to go on an ad lib now about something completely different. And remember this, it's not on. It's not the way I work. It's no, I'm going to work with what we've got. Yes, if there's a new announcement or someone's delayed or that happens all the time. You have to take that on board as a host, as a keynote speaker and stuff, and that's what I do. But when it's just a lack of preparation, I say to people, I don't really work like that. It's got to be done. And this last minute change and and ad hoc meetings. I work with people and sometimes I say, are you okay for ad hoc meetings? And no, I haven't got time in my diary. And yeah, you're welcome to ask. Am I free to jump on a call? And if I am, I'll happily do it. But please don't schedule out. We'll have a scheduled meeting. I'll make the scheduled meeting. We'll keep it for X amount of time. So for me, I'll ask people say, are you free at 2:00 on Wednesday or whatever? I'm like, for what? Okay. And how long was this meeting likely to last? I mean, what do you mean? 2:00 until the rest of the day? Or do you mean is it a 30-minute thing? Because you've got other things going on in your life. So I need to know boundaries of things like that. So for me, it's when people start pulling the things around and meetings start getting disorganized, when it's like too many of them and nothing really gets fixed, I'm like, this isn't efficient. So that will I'll recognize that something's out of balance for me. That's what I'll find. I think also if you're not now, but years ago, I had a big corporate job and I was running around in the car all the time, meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And the relaxation time was driving home for an hour and a half at night when I could catch up on some of those pivotal phone calls conversation I needed to have with people which had to be done in the business day, but like a conversation I need to have a member of staff. And I said, could we speak this evening? And that was my relaxation time, having those tricky conversations, but driving home, knowing that, well, I would say that work wouldn't call, but it was a 24-hour business. So yeah, they're good. That was my relaxation time. And I started feeling, uncomfortable in the stomach because I was eating junk food. I was running around. I was like, this is out of balance. My diet's not good. And later on, I was a sales trainer, and that was like 14-hour days, and you never stopped. Even when you ate, you was working and interviewing people. And when I did that, you was eating quick food. And I remember saying, my ambition is to get to the point where I can start eating healthy food again. So I realized it was for a few months. Okay, I thought I'd do it for a few months. And then after that, I needed to really address that because otherwise it would have infringed on my boundaries, So that's when I recognized it was a little bit out of balance. So tip number one, everybody, is recognize. So make a few notes for yourself at home. When do you recognize that something needs to be done about your work-life balance? When do you recognize it? How do you recognize it? Is it like Nick, your significant other, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, your friends will talk to you and say, hey, this seems a little bit off. Is it like Amanda and I? You'll feel something. You'll feel something doesn't feel right. Or perhaps you'll feel a little bit stressed maybe because, you're just not getting to do those little things that are important to you. They're getting pushed by the wayside. Are you coming home at night and finding your breakfast still in the sink, half eaten? You're like, you know what? Things aren't getting done. Is it the housework isn't getting done? Is it that kind of thing? Is the car looking a bit too dirty? I don't know what the answer is for you. But ask yourself the question, when do you recognize you need to be readdressing something and setting work-life boundaries to create a healthy balance? So that's tip number one. So now we're going to go on to tip number two, which is once you've identified it, ask. Tip number two is ask. Ask yourself questions. Ask yourself questions, what needs to change? So tip number two is ask. Ask yourself questions, what needs to change? So now I'm going to go over to Nick and ask Nick of an example for yourself when you've had that work-life balance issue, when you've had it in the past, which everybody has. What do you ask yourself? What kind of questions you think may need to change? Nick?
So for me, it's recognizing what my strengths are and basically delegating some of that work. So playing to my strengths and delegating some of the other stuff that maybe is outside of my skill level or something that I just don't have time or interest in learning, is to find a way to have someone else help me, whether that's hiring someone externally for whatever that task is, or if you have someone working under you to pass some of that work off. So that'd be one way to, I guess, ask and figure out a way to have some things change. And I think that'd be good for me for now.
Great. So yeah, I like that, Nick. That's really good. And Amanda, what about yourself? What have you found? Any experiences, any stories to share?
For me, it's always about how can I be more efficient at it, or like Nick said, about how can you delegate different tasks. And even when I'm teaching in the classroom, like some of the tasks can be designated to the kids, because even they wanted to do this Minecraft education, and I was like, I do not have time or the interest in learning how to do Minecraft education. So I said to them, I said, here's my idea. I know it has the capabilities. You guys need to tell me how, since you know how to use this, how we could connect it to the curriculum this way. And I said, if you guys can give me a like big enough reasons why and how I can connect it to the curriculum, then we can do a project on Minecraft education. And so essentially the kids had to teach me all of the capabilities of it. And I still barely know how to log into it, but they created these entire projects where they built the city of Sparks. If you ever read the book, The People of Sparks, they built the village of Sparks from the book, and had to explain all of the meaning of all of the books through their Flipgrid videos. And they did an amazing job. I still don't know how to log into Minecraft, but they can all do it. They did amazing projects, and other teachers will be like, how'd you get them to do that? I'm like, I let the kids teach each other.
I like that. It's good. So yeah, so that's what you find. So it's really about including other people sometimes, yeah. And I think that's an important point because sometimes you want to get the external factors, because sometimes we don't see ourselves, right? We don't see ourselves. We go out there, we're rushing around. Sometimes we're the last people to actually recognize that boundaries need to be changed. So if they do, when you ask it, you can ask other people, what do you think needs to change? If there's not, I remember, this is embarrassing. When I had my very, very busy corporate job, this was on a day off. I was walking around. I went to like a fete with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend was with some of my female friends, right? Took me out. And I had to find staff for the next day. Now, over the years, I had 2 paper diaries, full of people's phone numbers, and I had I had 1 diary. My apologies, 1 diary and 2 mobile phones, 2 business phones, right? And I was walking around with a phone, ringing people, trying to get them for the next day's shift. Walking around this fete, I didn't take any notice of what was going on the fete. I was not engaged. I was not with them. I hardly looked at my friends, and I hardly looked at my girlfriend. And I realized it was really difficult to hold down a relationship when I was working that hard. The company was out of balance. It needed to have this stuff really organized before, but I was the manager for that region. So it fell ultimately on my shoulders, but there was only a certain amount of resources they gave me. I could do nothing else with the resources that were given. And it had to be done. And, my boss worked in the same way. And said, this is crazy. We said to the director, you need to give us more resources to do that. We can't be spending our evenings and weekends doing this. Every day was like a battlefield, morning and evening. It was a great job in the sense of, I realized if I could do that, I could damn well do anything. Pretty much, but I'd never do it again. If you gave me $1 million now, I'd never go back and do it. Never. The guy who took over had a heart attack. So that's what it was like. But that was normal kind of thing. And one of my clients of a big corporate company, I wouldn't say the name, but you'd know it, said to me, "Didn't you ever get stressed?" Because I was dealing with an incident at their place, and I said, "Well, no. I mean, I've got maybe 3 of these incidents going on at any one time, plus all the usual stuff, 40 corporate clients and dealing with the directors, 150 staff, 4 or 5 managers reporting to me. That was just normal. And I said, but then again, my boss smokes a lot and I haven't got any fingernails. I said, so maybe I am stressed and I just didn't know it. It was just normal. And that was it. Be careful of the culture of this is the way we work. The martyrdom of working hard and great. Be careful of that, because that can't be a thing. This is the cult. This is how we are. It was normal in that industry to be like that. Very normal. So this is my point. So maybe other people notice it. And when my girlfriend pulled me to one side, like, what the hell was that about this afternoon? You hardly said a word to me. And I was like, yeah, I kind of remember being there a little bit, walking through the fade, go, oh yeah, that's good. And I just had to get back to what I was doing. It wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was contractually locked in to having to do this. I was obliged to do it. And that's why I said I'd rather have not gone out that day. It would have been easier to say, I'm sorry, I'm busy today, I can't come out. It would have been easier to have said that. But trying to please everyone, I went out and, tried to please my girlfriend and friends and go out with them. But yeah, it ended up looking kind of rude in the end because I was ignoring them. Anyway, so, I realized at that point, or they pointed to my attention, yeah, that's crazy. So my girlfriend said, I'll help you, address your CV, your resume. Let's get that up to date and get you a better job. So, she was quite positive about it. She understood I was under pressure, needed to get things done. But yeah, sure enough, that was it. And once when a member of staff said to me, did you watch that movie last night? And I just laughed. I said, I haven't seen a movie in years. I'm lucky if I get to see the adverts in between, the commercial breaks. I don't get to watch movies. I get home late, I eat my dinner off a tray on my lap and probably fall asleep with the dinner on the tray on my lap. I don't get to watch movies, And I thought, I should do it. I should be able to, right? So that's when I realized that something had to change. And one of the things was that needed to change. So yeah, number 2 is, ask yourself what needs to change, what needs to be different in your life. What do you need to delete? What do you need to change? What do you need to incorporate? Because sometimes you need to add something new. It's not always about taking away. Sometimes it's about adding something new, perhaps a system that will allow you more free time. So perhaps it's a question of adding something. Those of you out there with a business, maybe you're doing your own bookkeeping. Maybe you shouldn't be. Now, if you like it and it's great and it's you and your workflow and you're great at doing that, you should absolutely do it. But if you're, I don't know, let's say Nick's got a great clothing line. He's great in that. He's a designer. He's a great person with ideas. Now, maybe he's great at bookkeeping. Maybe he likes doing it. If so, rock on, do it. If you don't, and it's a stress, perhaps it would be quicker and actually more economical if you outsource that to a bookkeeper who would do it probably more efficiently and quicker. It would take away the stress of, have I done it correctly? Because that's what they do. They would do it correctly anyway. The fees are tax deductible. Check that with your local country just in case. But in most countries, it's tax deductible. And it allows you to shine and do your very best work because you're focusing on what you do very well or letting other people do that. So that could relinquish some time. And that could be an example, and I'm not saying for you in particular, Nick, but for anyone out there listening, that could be an example for you of something that you could change. I.e., you haven't got to do it all yourself. If you're running a business, it's about running a business. That doesn't mean to say doing everything yourself. Okay, so that's a bit of a mindset shift there, but it may sound obvious. And I know you say, oh, it's going to take time to train other people. I know. But unless you invest, and there's the key word, unless you invest that time, it's never going to get any easier. So just take time out, let everything else go to rack and ruin for a day or two while you train that person to do that thing. Then you brought that time back immediately. Yes, you may need to pop back in and just nudge that person back on track because they may not get it right the first time. That's normal. But that's a smaller adjustment. That's not going to have to invest another couple of days on that. you know, this is different for any different industry or situation, but, you know, you go back and put 25% of the time back in to keep that person on track, then 10%, then 5%, then never at all. There's never a better, I always used to spend a lot of time, invest a lot of time into training other people to do things, which meant I no longer had to do them. So yeah, certainly take a look at those things. That could be an example. So for you out there, what needs to change for you? What do you need to change? If you don't know, ask those around you who are noticing those symptoms and tell you what needs to change to help you create a healthy work-life balance. Anything else to add, guys, before we move on to tip number 3? No. All right. So tip number 3 is B for boundaries, the boundaries themselves. Actually set those boundaries. So now we know what needs to change, we set them. And that really means making an obligation to yourself. Obligation of, right, this is it. This is the boundaries. This is what I'm not going to change. Like my sister, after 8 o'clock at night, she switches off. It's TV. TV for her, 8 o'clock, that's it. Her work is done for the day, that's it. She'll relax and that's it. So that's one of her boundaries. You know, I won't call her after that time. Well, I can, but it will just be, you know, she may answer, she may not, but she may turn the phone off. It's that kind of thing. It's an 8 o'clock bit. So Nick, what about you when it comes to boundaries or recognizing it? What about you?
So being, I guess, new in this world of being my own boss, it's definitely it's a thing that ebbs and flows for me, and it's what I wouldn't put up with long term is something that I am accepting in the short term. There's those little bursts of time where I have, you know, a lot to do to get new product ready, let's say for sale when it comes in from my manufacturer. And so I will, you know, work late and come over to my office and do a bunch of things after the kids are in bed, where if I were to do that the whole year, I mean, that just wouldn't be acceptable to me, and that would be outside of my boundaries. But in the short term, it just makes sense for me to get those things done because they need to get done. And so I guess it's those boundaries for me are kind of an evolving and always changing thing. But I think it's important to have those boundaries, but then to know that and don't be so caught up on, you know, the perfection of your boundaries either, right? That there's going to be times where you're going to have to move outside of what you've set, your boundaries, I guess. But to still know what those are. And I guess it's one of those situations where it's like, you got to know the rules in order to break them kind of thing. So that would be kind of where I'm at personally right now anyways. So important for sure to have those boundaries, but also you can't get too fixated on them either, because things happen.
Yeah, good point, Nick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's the great point to get moving on this stuff is they're not set in stone. They're a version 1, right? They're a version 1. They're a version 1. Great point, Nick. Look, thanks for bringing it up. Amanda, what do you think?
I think you really need to set boundaries around your time so that you have capacity and energy to actually be able to do what you want to achieve. And so one of the things in teaching is there's always like all of these things coming down from above that are like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do this. And I'm always like, what is it that I actually need to do versus what is it that you're saying I need to do? Because after teaching for over 15 years, there's always things coming down and none of them really end up being that important. Like there was a point in time where we had to learn this certain software and all of the kids' stuff was going to be on the software and we're going to update it all the time. And everyone was so stressed out about it and it completely flopped.
Really?
And then sorry, you guys like just disappeared on my screen. And then it's again, so that one's gone completely to the side. Nobody uses it anymore. And now it's something else. And so there's always constantly things like that, especially in education, where I'm like, is this really valuable for my time? If it's not actually impacting the kids right now, and impacting what I actually need to do right now, I'm not going to worry about it. Because if I worried about all of the things that they're telling us to do all of the time, I would be completely overwhelmed all of the time. And I would have like no work-life balance at all. So I always think it is, what is it that I actually need to do and how is it impacting kids? And then I choose those things to do.
I love that. That's a good point. And I love the way you said that, is that when people would say all these things, you're like, what is it you actually want me to do? Because people talk in generalities and never specific about, and this is one of my key things, and I'm really with you on this, Amanda, is like, what actually needs to be done? What are the key points here that need to be hit? And I think that's the way I approach a lot of things in life. Once you understand what really needs to be done, you take away a lot of the fear and a lot of the, what I call the white noise around something, the confusion. You know, you actually get exactly to what really needs to be done. And that's the key part. Okay, so great. So we've actually got to the boundaries themselves. As Nick said, the boundaries, set them. And I think it's, when I coach a lot of people, I talk about just getting started and just do it. Just do it. It hasn't got to be perfect. Just get it started. We can edit it along the way. And that was a big lesson for me many years ago, was not being a perfectionist, just getting it started, doing it and perfect it along the route. And I think that's really great, because if anyone out there who's a procrastinator, oh, well, I haven't got the boundaries exactly. It doesn't matter. Just get the rough idea. You know that basically needs to change to something like that and to something like that. Get it started. They're not set in stone. You can perfect them later. And I think that's a great point. Thanks for raising that, Nick. And thanks for that example, Amanda. I think that was I love that very, very much. That's great. Great. All right. So what have we got so far? We've got tip number 1, which is recognize when something needs to change. Number 2, ask yourself or ask those around you, what specifically is it that needs to change? Number 3 is setting those boundaries, making that commitment to yourself. This is it. And perhaps asking those around you also, can you help, if you see me not sticking to that commitment, can you give me a quick nudge and just say, hey, didn't you say, the phone was going to go off at 8 o'clock or something like that, or that kind of thing, or, only 2 glasses of wine, whatever it is, that thing for you, that boundary, or the no more phone calls to the boss after, once it is, let them ask you, hold you accountable. Now, but of course, it's not set in stone, but you've got to start somewhere and start having that accountability built in. Number 4 is, yes, you got it. It's no good just you knowing it. It's about other people knowing it. Number 4 begins with C and ends with E. It's communicate. Communicate those boundaries with those around you. Now, whether that's your children, whether it's your friends, your spouse, your work colleagues, or perhaps your work team or your boss, communicate the message, because after all, they can't be blamed for breaking it if they don't know you even said it in the first place. So communicate. So really, if it comes to setting boundaries, perhaps in a team environment or in a business environment, it's not about dictating. It's about creating. And that is from communication with people. I held this meeting last night with some local community people, and I said, guys, what do you think we need to change? What do you think? Is there anything we need to change? Can we do anything more to help you in your role? Is there anything, anything that's going really well? Anything could be a little bit better. Anything we can do better. What do we need to? I always talk about the sculpture, right? And going back to the sculpture and just putting more detail into editing the process. What can we do? Communicate it with other people, get them involved, and ask their opinions. Don't dictate, ask. Because quite often they can come up with ideas of, you do this thing before you go home at 5 o'clock. You really, that slack day at 3:15, that time of day, you could do it there. And you could do that in the morning. It's okay. There's little things that can happen. So if it is you have to do that work task, that means you have to leave work at a certain time and you miss that train and the next train is not for 40 minutes or an hour, is there something you can negotiate to come in a little bit earlier the next morning to do it then, so you prep it up so that you can make the last shot? Communicate it with people around you. You might find your boss or your team people are a lot more tuned in to wanting to make your balance a healthy work-life balance than you actually know. They may be more willing to do that. So communicate the message, and that often solves a lot of problems. Nick, what do you think? Communication, good idea, bad idea? Does it work? Any examples?
Yeah, great idea. I love how you just described that communication and that just so everyone knows the expectations, right? It's so many problems come when those expectations aren't clearly set and people are left not exactly knowing what the other person's doing or thinking or whatever. And anyways, it's a lot better to just communicate and then to tell the truth too. That's a big thing for me, is that even though you think it's gonna maybe hurt someone's feelings or whatever, it's like the truth is always the best answer for sure. It causes so much less harm in the long term. And a lot of times you make up these little things in your head of like, oh, what are they gonna think, or what all this chatter going on, and then you just speak your truth or tell the person the truth, and it's like, oh yeah, all those negative things that I thought might have maybe happened, if possibly, it's like, no, that didn't happen at all. It was ended up being the best thing for sure. And I'll just say one more thing quick, and that was learning to say no is huge. And so that would be part of that communicating your no's. And Grant, you gave that great example of going on that day out with your girlfriend and friends, and if you should have just said no, right? And my father-in-law, he was a farmer, he just retired, but he would always say too, if he had stuff to do back at the farm and he, let's say, said yes to going to the golf course for an afternoon, it was like, that was always the worst idea because his head wasn't in it. So he wasn't present on the golf course. And then obviously the work wasn't getting done back at the farm. So he should have just said no. He should have communicated his no, and that would have been better off for everyone involved. That's it for me for now.
Thanks. Amanda, anything quick to add before we go to the last tip?
The communicate, I think, is really important, especially when you understand how you work. And so some people like meetings. I do not like meetings. So if you want me to come up with something creative, sitting in a meeting is never going to get there. So the school, like, I'm kind of the person that the school comes to when they want like some big art piece or something for the school or some big project. And they'll be like, okay, we're going to have a meeting for it. I'm like, no, no, we're not. Tell me, passing me by in the hallway, what it is that you want and what your kind of like the vision is, or just like a few things about it. I will come up with something, but I will never come up with anything in a meeting because my brain doesn't work that way. I'll come up with it on my drive to school or in the shower or something, but I will never, like when you put me on the spot and are like, okay, we need to plan this right now, I'll be like, I got nothing.
I love that.
And so, or even like, we always have these meetings on Friday afternoons. I'm like, this is the worst time ever to have meetings. Like, my brain is not here at all. And I'm like fooling around on my computer. I'm worse than like children, actually. I'm like watching TikTok on my phone during the meetings. Like, I am the worst student ever, especially when I'm like, I've checked out. And so but I'll still be like half listening. And then I'll like send messages on Saturday morning when actually something pops into my head. I'm like, oh, we should do this and this and this. And they're like, you weren't paying attention at all yesterday. Like, I know, because I was checked out. I was done. But something will come up. Just trust me like that, because I don't work in meetings. I don't. My brain is too ADD to pay attention to anything like that. And so sometimes you just have to communicate how you work, because not everybody works the same. And some people find real value in like that collaborative piece of a meeting. I don't, because I'm much better with one or two people and just like, let's get it done. Yeah. And that's how I work the most efficiently and the most creatively.
Great point, Amanda. I love that, knowing how you work. And I think that's true. Communication styles, there's so many different. So everybody, so to conclude, before we go back to Carol Ann, number one is recognize the symptoms that something needs to change. Number two is ask yourself, what are those specific things that need to change? But remember, these things are not set in stone, and we're going to come to that. Number three is actually set those boundaries, make that commitment to yourself and to those people around you, so they can help to hold you accountable to those boundaries. Number four is communicate. Communicate it. It's no good just you knowing it. Communicate it to those people that are part of this, be it your boss, your family, your children, your spouses, etc., your team. And number five is, of course, Is it working? Is it not working? Does it need tweaking? We're talking about evaluate. Yes, as we said earlier, they're not set in stone. Is it working? Is it great? Are those adjustments exactly right? Or do they just need to move 1 or 2 degrees to the left or right? Yes, you can change it. Yes, you can evaluate it. So that's great. That helps you get over procrastination because you just get started, as we said. But tip number 5 is evaluate. So number 1 was recognize what are the symptoms that something needs to change. Number 2, number 2 is ask yourself what specifically needs to change. Number 3, set those boundaries. Ask someone else to hold you accountable to sticking to those boundaries. Number 4 is to communicate it. Communicate it to those people around you, your team, your boss, your family, etc. Communicate it to. And number 5, evaluate it. Does it need adjusting or is it just right? If you do all of those things, all those 5 things, you should have a healthy work-life balance and have set your boundaries. Amanda, Nick, any final thoughts before we hand back to Caroline?
Just quickly, yeah, I would say don't be too hard on yourself. Accept that it's not always going to be perfect right off the hop, right? It's going to be an evolving thing, and to allow it to unfold and not be too hard on yourself would be my biggest tip. And just get started. That's it for me.
Amanda?
I always think of what is it that like uplifts you and try to do more of that, because when you're creating that healthy work-life balance, you want to have energy and you want to feel excited about it. And if you're not feeling excited about it, how can you put a little bit more of that spark back into it? And so find that piece, and then that'll help you find balance as well.
Love that. It's pretty close to what I was going to say, is that do it joyfully. Don't think, oh my God, I've got to sort out this. Don't make a drama. Just joyfully think of it. Oh, this is going to make my life even better. So do it gleefully, do it joyfully, and try to do everything you do in life joyfully. And you'll find the results are much better. Everybody, thank you very much. Over to you, Caroline.
Lovely, thank you. And what a great discussion. I love the 5 points that you came up with. And it certainly reminded me of a time where I didn't even recognize the symptom. And I almost missed my daughter's graduation because I got so involved with school, so involved with the importance. There was, an inset coming up, and because I was head of department, it was important I be there. That inset time was the same time as my daughter's graduation. And she was saying, oh, it's okay, mum, it's okay, mum. And even though I felt awful, it was like, oh, okay. But then I made a request of the headmaster about something else, and he said no. I was literally, what? I give all my time, my energy, and it brought me to my senses in that moment that I was willing to forego my daughter's graduation for school.
Wow. I've
never forgotten that. That was a really big lesson. And so it's like, yes, certainly all those points that you've made.
Thanks for sharing that, Caroline.
Think about it. How is it impacting you? And I made her graduation. I thought, oh, I'm so glad.
Well, yeah. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. And it is those pivotal points in life that really make you sit up and recognize that something needs to change. Yeah. Very quickly, Amanda, if people want to speak to you more about creating work-life balance, how do they find you?
Just on my website or on Instagram or Facebook or anything as Art, Mindfulness and Creativity.
Thank you. And Nick?
Yeah, same thing, just through my website, flowstatedesigns.ca, or on any of the social media platforms under Flow State Designs.
Thank you. And for myself, it's Grant.Morrell at Instagram. Hit me up, let me know we can help you more, and we help you create a healthy work-life balance. Over to you, Caroline.
Beautiful. And I see you've got it by your names of people I weren't hearing.
That's right.
Your names, they're there. Beautiful. So thank you. And we're here Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. Do look us up on YouTube, different channels. Please subscribe, share, and follow us. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you for joining us. See you again. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.